Hello, and welcome to a new special Games That Weren't feature, where today we're going to be taking a look at some more findings that have been found on Archer Maclean's work discs. So for the past 6 months or so, Games That Weren't have been meticulously trying to back up all of Archer's work discs, and in particular we've been focusing on the 5¼ inch discs. I'm pleased to say that all of these have now been fully backed up, and I'd say that we probably got 99% of the content off of those discs and made safe. So the ones that had degradation on, we managed to still recover as much data as we possibly could. So I'm really pleased overall, and it's been thanks to that we've been able to kind of show you what we've previously shown you and what we're about to show you today. And it's of course thanks to Chris Wilkins that all of this has been possible to actually get all of Archer's work saved and properly preserved. Just before Christmas in 2023, we decided to look at some of the contents of Archer's discs, and in particular we focused on what would be the origins of DropZone. So Archer in the past has stated that DropZone was heavily inspired by the likes of Defender and also Stargate, but what we didn't know was that Archer had actually created proper conversions of both of those games. He'd even pitched them to Atari, but unfortunately Atari decided to reject those pitches, and it was from that Archer decided to go it alone and create his very own design based on those two games. So eventually we would end up with DropZone, a game that we all know and love today. So there's still plenty of work to go and much more to back up, but in the meantime we wanted to pause for a moment and take a look at some more findings that we found on those discs. And in particular, today we're going to be focusing on various arcade experiments that Archer had created for the Atari 8-bit computer around about the same time he was working on Defender and Stargate. As well as this, we also found a number of little demos and example bits of code, which we're also going to kind of bundle together and show you at the end. All of these you'll be able to download from the website, and you can find the link in the description for this video. So let's take a look at what we found. So first up, the name pretty much gives it away, but this small basic program that we found on one of the discs demonstrates Archer sort of playing around with the graphics modes and constructing his own version of Donkey Kong. Unfortunately, it isn't playable. It's just kind of using basic to draw the basic screen and to do all the different girders. But you can see there was some attempt at seeing how Donkey Kong could look on the Atari, and perhaps Archer may have considered starting his own, but there was no kind of evidence of any code there. Then even before the days of Archer Maclean's pool and Jimmy White's World in Snooker, back in the early days Archer was playing around with 3D on his Atari, and here he takes a very quick look to see how some of the graphics could be rendered. Again, just using a basic example just to kind of produce some of the screens. So here's the code. And then we have a small demonstration where you can kind of pick a shape, and there's about 4 in total, and set a scale, and it will draw that onto the screen. So here it's a bit too big. Let's try and make that a bit smaller. And you can see you've got some of the basic level designs for Tempest. Again, there's no actual game code here, it's just playing around with the graphic modes and trying to get something looking like the arcade machine. Again, looking through the rest of the discs, there was no further coding attempts to try and extend it beyond this demo. Seems like Archer had done this and left it and moved on to other projects. Interestingly, it says about a 5th shape, but it's not present. I think it's just an error in the code. There's only 4 shapes in total, and you can see that from the data. Next up is something you may not guess from the file name. It's quite an obscure file name that Archer occasionally used. Now this is something that has a little bit more action in it as well. The other things were just graphic demonstrations. This time it seems that Archer was making something a little bit playable and kind of getting used to the control system on the Atari. So let's run it and then show what it is. So here we have a very early and unfinished Breakout clone. And we're pretty sure that this is something that Archer created himself. Several reasons is that the file name convention seems to match what he was using for development code. And also it's heavily unfinished and bugged. There's no score on it and it crashes, which you'll see in a moment when the ball goes out of play. So we are fairly convinced that this is Archer's work. He may have potentially taken some routines from books or magazines. We're not sure. I mean, we did check to see if there was anything similar to this, and we couldn't see anything in the archives. So here it is. So he's got the paddle control for the bat at the bottom, and you know, there's no actual score or anything on there, but it's quite neat to see. And then we have something a little bit more exciting. So for years, there's been various rumours that Archer had worked on his own conversion of Robotron for the Atari. And I think there was a mention in Zap 64 when they done an interview with him. So when I was preserving the discs, Bertrand from Atari Mania, he told me about this Robotron game and asked me to kind of keep an eye out for it. So that I did. So what we have here is some of the findings that we managed to find on the discs. So first up, a basic experiment. So similar to the Kong and Tempest games, what we have here is just another sort of demonstration of trying to draw some of the Robotron graphics onto the screen. However, with this particular demo, it seems that Archer had put in some very basic joystick controls in there. So that kind of yellow cursor that you can see moving around, and I'll speed it up in a moment so you can see the monsters moving a bit quicker. You can move that around the screen as if it's your player, and then the robots at the top half of the screen will kind of follow you around. So it's just looping now, essentially. So yeah, there's nothing playable to it, but there's some basic movement patterns for the droids. It's too slow because it's written in BASIC. But you can see quite clearly that Archer is just having a play and seeing what he could do and just testing a few concepts out. It's interesting that the bottom half of the screen seems to be slightly more zoomed in with the robot, so I don't know if that was deliberate or if there's some kind of split screen effect. But we'll put the code in the discs and you can kind of examine it for yourself. But that wasn't all. So also on some of the discs, we found a set of compiled files. So there was some Robotron machine language source code, which got us quite excited. And we looked at the different builds and we found about 3 in total, which we're just going to show you now. And here's the first build. Unfortunately, nothing playable. But here we have something which is just kind of generating objects which fade on the screen. And when you press the fire button, it sort of cycles through and randomly generates and puts the objects on the screen really quickly. So fairly interesting, but there's not much going on. The next demo, however, has a bit more in it. So the same kind of flashing objects, a little bit more detail on there, but now like a score panel and a wave set of text. And then the actual third build just coming up. Unfortunately, not much more to it. So that you can't actually start these at all, or play them or anything. It's just kind of showing the screen layout, and that's it. But it shows that Archer had actually started what looked like a serious conversion of Robotron, but seemed to have lost interest very early on and ditched it. We couldn't find any evidence of anything else that had been done for the game. Only a few other bits and pieces, which we'll show you shortly. The only other materials that we found on the discs, there was a graphics file, which you can see here. So Archer was just playing around with the drawing package, just kind of drawing some of the objects in. So I've kind of extracted these out as best I can. Possibly there might be some color data stored in there that I've managed to extract. So if anyone fancies having a look and providing a proper screenshot, then please do. But here you can see some of the different characters from the game, unfortunately which weren't implemented and pulled into the demo by the looks of it. So yeah, it's a shame really. As I say, the demos that we showed previously, there was tried pressing all kinds of different buttons and trying to see if there was any way of starting the game or having something basic that you could play, and I couldn't seem to find anything at all. And then looking through the source code, there was no suggestion of anything, any playable elements in there. It was just kind of drawing routines and that was it. It seemed to have been abandoned extremely early on. Then finally, with regards to kind of Robotron findings on the discs, we found this graphic tool which we think Archer written to kind of draw some of the Robotron graphics for the game. So this kind of really demonstrates that we do think that Archer was serious about doing a conversion. But I don't know, maybe he just felt that it was going to be a bit too much with all the objects on the screen. I'm not sure. So this tool was kind of used, we think, to draw the graphics like we saw on the previous screen. But yeah, this is pretty much all the materials that we could find regarding Robotron. So our guess is that Archer had kind of struggled maybe to get some of the objects on the screen or displaying, or maybe he just felt that Defender was a better match, so kind of switched focus to that instead. But the good thing is that this kind of puts to bed the mystery of Robotron on the Atari, and sadly we weren't able to kind of find something that was playable for you to see. That would have been absolutely amazing. But there you go. Hopefully that solves one particular mystery. It seems like Archer wasn't just doing arcade conversion stuff as well, playing around. But actually thinking about it, this may have been inspired by a certain arcade. But Archer was also playing with what seemed to be like a road drawing routine, or trying to make some kind of racing game. So perhaps he was inspired by pole position. Who knows? But what we have here is a couple of basic experiments where he was drawing what seemed to be like a road and an horizon, and then the second demo here is kind of drawing the horizon very slowly to make it come down. I'll speed it up in a second so you can see how it maybe looked in machine language. So again, he's just kind of playing around at this stage. And then there was this other program as well, which I'm not entirely sure what it is or what it was intended for, but it seemed to kind of match the previous experiments we just saw. So you kind of put some color and luminance details in there, and it will try and render some kind of horizon and a grid. So we assume this was related. It may not be, but we just kind of bundle it together anyway for now. And then possibly most interesting of all the demos, for the road demos, was this particular file here that we found. So again, written in BASIC, Archer's got quite a slow little draw routine for the mountain, and we've got something that looks quite a bit like pole position. We've got the similar kind of mountains in the background. So nothing playable. This is just a graphic demonstration, like with most of the things that we found. We have a title there of Road Roller and a date of 1983, so when it was being done. So around about the same time as Defender and Stargate, it seems. But then we also found a couple of compiled machine language routines, which we think are also related to this Road Roller game that Archer was looking at. And this first one, we've just got a very simple kind of line effect, which makes it look like you're kind of coming in and out of the screen. So, I mean, this may not have been related to Road Roller, but it possibly may have been. It may have been just Archer experimenting and trying to see different ways that you could kind of get some kind of road routine working. So you might have the sky at the top there. And then there's another version here which has something more looking more like a sky coming towards you. So that kind of is what suggested to me it could be related to Road Roller. Again, I could be completely wrong, but unfortunately we can't find that out from Archer himself. But you could see how that possibly could have been overlaid onto a road of some kind, of giving some kind of drawing effect. So these are completely controllable as well, so you can use the joystick to kind of speed it up or make it go in reverse. So that concludes the game experiments that Archer was doing. So now what we're going to finish up with is a series of little demonstrations and code snippets that we also found, where possibly Archer was producing effects for some of his games, or just playing around with the hardware and getting familiar with it. The first thing we're going to take a look at is a series of color cycle demos. So we have a slightly simple version here, making use of the Atari's palette, and then a slightly more advanced one after that. Now, I think pretty sure that these have been used in finished products that Archer did. and we're going to be looking at some other products at a later date that Archer produced, which never got released. I'm pretty sure one of those does use that effect. Next up, we have some demonstrations with drawing the Atari logo at various different sizes. So it's a little bit of a slow draw rate because it's all done in BASIC. And then followed by like a large version that just about fits on the screen. Now we think these logo demos and the color cycle demos were actually combined at some point and used together. So here Archer produced them separately to then combine at a later date. So here we've got the actual Atari logo itself. And then this is followed by something which takes that logo and then looks to draw it multiple times. What I'll do is I'll speed that up in a moment just to kind of save you the pain of watching it slowly draw and listening to my boring voice. So there we go. Then next up is a little colour cycle demo, which not 100% certain if it is Archer's work or not, but as it was found in his discs, we just include it just in case. It may have been taken from a book. And then slightly more interesting is the a set of demos that we found and different effects, which we've kind of grouped together. So here we have something which is drawing some very simple squares on the screen, but then dropping in some bouncing balls that are kind of trying to keep within the boundaries. And there was 2 demos of this. The second one we're just going to see shortly. This may potentially be an earlier version, we're not sure. Seems a little bit slower. Slight colour variation as well. But then separately there was this maze generator program which we found. So it generates a very simple blue maze. That was then taken, it seems, by Archer and then combined with the bouncing ball demo. So here we have the same maze generator, but now with alternating colours on the lines. And then he's kind of dropped the bouncing balls in. It doesn't quite work. Some of the balls are bouncing out of the boundaries. Yeah, it shows a concept that Archer was playing around with. Not entirely sure if this was actually intended for a game or if it was just Archer playing around. There was no kind of evidence in his CV at the time to suggest that he was doing a maze game or a road racing game or a Robotron game. The only mentions he kept in his CV was the likes of Stargate, Defender, and DropZone back then. But a nice, interesting curiosity nonetheless. And then we found this kind of Rubik Cube, which again we assume this is by Archer. The reason is because it's unfinished. So we assume that Archer was just playing around with the graphic modes. It may have been with the thought of producing an actual game where you could rotate that cube. Not 100% sure. Unfortunately, Archer's not here. We're unable to ask him now. And again, there's no kind of written evidence that suggests what some of these concepts were for. And then there was like a small segment of scrolling code. Not sure if that ever got used in anything. Again, it may have just been playing around. And then the last bit that we found, just to conclude, again, we're not sure if this was something that Archer produced. Now, this may well have been taken out of a book, like maybe something that's showing you how to do graphics. For example, splitting the screen. There's like a split screen example, and there's a sawtooth effect that comes across the screen after you put some values in. This could well be something taken from an example, but we just included it just in case. If anyone does recognise it from a particular book, please let us know and we'll update the page accordingly. So that concludes our video, and I really hope you enjoyed what we had to show you today. Again, if you want to kind of check these out for yourself, then please check the link in the description where you can download some of the files and load them up in an emulator. So next time we'll try and take a look at some more bits and pieces we also found on Archer's discs, including an animated demo and also a results program. But for now, I bid you farewell and we'll see you in the next video. But before I disappear, it's really crucial that I thank the following people, because if it wasn't for them, this video and all of the preservation work wouldn't have been possible. So first of all, to Chris Wilkins of Fusion Retro Books, who is the person who very kindly loaned all of Archer's materials to back up. Then there's Alan Hammerton, who has been providing various bits of hardware to help preserve some of the files and materials that we're going to be doing in the future. To Matt Allen, who has loaned his 5¼ inch flippy drive, as unfortunately I don't have a flippy drive at the moment, so I've been using that to back all his discs up, and he'll be very pleased to hear that he'll be getting his disc drive back very soon. But also to Bertrand from Atari Mania, who had been giving me a lot of advice over the past few months in terms of how best to kind of read in some of those Atari files and making sure that what I was backing up was solid and being done properly. So thank you everyone, and yeah, see you in the next video.